Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys checking out the video today and spending some time with me. We're going to be talking about how to catch bass in rising water conditions, which this is something you're going to have. If you fish long enough, you guys have probably already been through it, but when the water rises, it causes bass to position, do a lot of different things based upon a lot of variables, so we're going to get into that in today's video. And also, guys, a little sorry if I sound raspy. I'm sort of getting over the flu the last couple of days, so just now getting back up on my feet. So apologize for that. And also, guys, I wanted to extend a big thank you out there before we get started in the video. Everybody that's taken time to subscribe here to the channel and use all the links I put in the description. If you guys that are using my Tackle Warehouse links that I put in every description is the reason this channel's on YouTube. So thank you very much if you're one of the viewers that are doing that. Really appreciate that. Okay, conditions are always changing in bass fishing. It's like you never have the same set of conditions anytime, regardless what the year is. There's always some type of subtle difference in the condition. And one of the realities in fishing is you're going to have rising water in any lake across the country, some of them more than others, because some lakes, like for example, some of my lakes here in Missouri, like Bull Shoals Lake, it can rise as much as 30 feet in one year. And then other lakes that have a little bit more of an ability to control those water levels and they don't let them get up, they're still going to rise, but they only may rise a couple feet. Say, for example, Lake of the Ozarks here in Missouri, which they control it a lot more, it rarely rises over 3 or 4 feet, even on a super heavy rain. So, depends on each lake as far as the extent of the rise. But there's a lot to how to catch bass on rising water. Now, let me sort of go through some of the scenarios and the variables with that, because a lot of it is based upon water clarity and the extent of the rise. Because, like I said, sometimes you're going to have a rise of only a couple feet, and then sometimes you're going to have a rise of 10 or 20 feet, and that rise can occur over a short period of time or a long period of time. So I'm going to sort of give you guys my experience on what I have seen with rising water. Now, the most difficult rising water situation to fish is when the lake comes up really fast and the lake waters, and there's a lot of dirty water coming into the lake. If you have a lake that comes up fast and there's dirty water into it, a lot of times that'll put those fish into a shock a little bit. It takes a few days for them just to acclimate to it. And if you have a lake like that comes up a significant difference and it has some dirty water coming into it, you're going to have to find some really shallow cover to fish. Now, a lot of times this can be like sometimes you're up in a flooded yard. You heard people catching fish off picnic tables before. The areas that I like to fish under those conditions are these flat areas that the fish can move up into and get in a suitable water depth. Because let's say, for example, you have some water visibility that's only like a foot or so. You got to be in shallow water. Those fish are not going to be in deep water, so you got to get on those flatter type areas, where you can get into that 1, 2, 3 foot of water. So that's one of the things I like to look for in that. Now, another way that you can possibly catch them in those scenarios is if you get on some steep, rocky, bluffy type banks, because those fish don't have as many places to go, but they can still tuck up tight on the rock. That's probably the most difficult high water condition that you're going to get into, because a lot of times you'll have water coming up fast and it still stays clear. It won't dirty up. Some of the upper tributaries will dirty up, but as the lake rises throughout the lake, the dirty water hasn't gotten down to that area yet. Now, this is some of my favorite type of areas to fish. Is, say, for example, there's a lot of water coming into the lake. The lake's coming up, 2 or 3 feet a day, and the rivers and the creek arms are pretty muddy. But the main lake, down the lake, even though it's coming up, is still clear. And as that water comes up, you're getting more and more flooded cover in the water. It could be willow trees, it could be regular type trees, it could be bushes, it could be grass, it could be whatever. If you have water coming up in that type of a scenario and the water's clear, this can be some really good fishing, and it can be some really good flipping. This is probably my favorite ways to catch bass flipping, is if the water comes up high and it stays clean. This is a good way to catch them flipping. Another thing that you're going to notice when water comes up fast like that is, let's say, for example, the lake you're fishing, the water comes up really fast. It comes up 6 or 7 feet over the course of a day or two. And it stays like that for a long time. What happens a lot of times is those fish, they will not go up into that flooded cover. They will stay out on what's called the old shoreline. So say, for example, if you have, say your lake level is 915, and then on a normal level, and then the lake raises 10 feet, and now it's 925. It rose from 915 to 925 real quick. A lot of times, in fact, sometimes more than not, those fish will stay at that 915 level. They won't move up into that 925 level to get into the flooded cover, which is puzzling to me. I don't really understand why a bass would sit out there around no cover in 915 and they could be up into flooded cover at 925, but they do. That's why one of the really good techniques to catch fish on, if the lake comes up real fast, is throwing it like a Carolina rig on the outside of the flooded cover. It's a really good way to catch them. And a lot of times those smaller fish, if you're trying to catch them flipping up in that type of water, those smaller fish will be the first fish to move up in there. Now, let's talk a little bit about shallow water flooded cover fishing. Now, when the water is flooded into cover, there's got to be a couple different scenarios that happen for the flipping to be good or spinnerbait or whatever. First of all, from my experience, you need to have like anywhere between, say, 2.5 to 5 foot of water in the cover. So the lake level has got to be situated. Let's say, for example, you've got a willow tree in the water. That willow tree needs to be positioned in like 3 to 5 foot of water. Again, depending upon the water clarity. If the water clarity is dirty, maybe a little less. If the water clarity is really clear, maybe a little bit more. But under normal water clarity conditions of about 2 feet, that 3 to 5 foot zone is going to be really good for that fish to be up in that flooded willow tree, which will make for some really good flipping, especially if the water's been up there a little bit of time. It seems like to me that the water needs to be up into the cover for about a week and start to stabilize a little bit before those fish, especially the bigger fish, really start to get into that flooded cover. Now, another thing is you'll find out when the water gets high into flooded cover and it starts to drop down, which inevitably it does, those fish, they will stay into that shallow cover until they got no water left in there. It's like, just because the water's dropping doesn't necessarily mean the fish are going to move out of that stuff, as long as you have, some pretty complex cover and you got the right water visibility. So don't be scared. Let's say, for example, if you're fishing and the lake's flooded 5 foot up into the trees, and then all of a sudden a couple of days later it's down, there's only 2 foot of water in those trees, those fish will still be there a lot of times in those flooded conditions. Another consideration with flooded conditions is your water temperature. You're always going to do a little bit better fishing flooded cover if that water temperature is over about 60 degrees. I like it to be about 60 to 80 degrees. If it's below 60, you can still catch them in it, but actually maybe 55 degrees, 55 to 60. But if it's below 55 degrees, you're probably going to have a little bit tougher time catching fish out of flooded cover. Best time for flooded cover fishing has been, my opinion, has been like the springtime of the year into the early summer. And then again, if you do have some type of high water in the fall time, like October or November, it can be pretty good as well. So a lot of variables with it, guys. There's not one puzzle that really fits all this, because like I said, every lake across the country is going to have a different set of circumstances as that water rises, depending upon the intensity of the precipitation. The amount that the water rises is going to fluctuate greatly. The actual distance that it rises is going to fluctuate greatly, and the associated water clarity changes are going to be all over the board, depending upon what part of the lake you're in and the composition of the lake that you have. So that's just it's hard to like say that this is what happens when the water comes up in a lake, because it's not the same everywhere. But if you would give me, if you'd say, Randy, what is the best situation to fish rising water on a lake? Give me water temperatures of about 65 degrees. Give me about probably 2.5 foot of visibility in the lake that I'm fishing. And give me about, 3 to 6 foot of water in the cover that I'm fishing. That is some perfect flipping there. It's some of the best flipping I've had into those situations. So anyway, I hope that answers a few of your questions, guys, and we'll talk later.